why you should never have the talk with your kids. There's two subjects that we make really weird for kids: death and sex. It's weird because these are things that kids have been exposed to in one way or another throughout all of human history, and still are exposed to these things in a lot of cultures around the world. Let's take death, for example. A few years ago, I had appendicitis. No big deal. You go to the ER, yep, it's appendicitis, go into surgery. I was home that evening. Nobody thought any more about it. But throughout all of human history, until the very, very recent modern, and in a lot of places still around the world, it would have looked like this. Daddy's tummy hurts. Daddy's really sick. Daddy's in and out of consciousness. Daddy's saying goodbye. Daddy's dead. And the kids would have seen all of that. They would have been a part of it. It wouldn't have been hidden from them or kept from them. It would have been sad for them like it was for everybody else. But death and sickness weren't hidden away in hospitals or convalescent homes or ambulances. These were things that things happen quickly. I mean, somebody could say, my head hurts, and then an hour or a day later they're dead from meningitis. Nobody knew what it was, but they just knew they were gone. These are things that were regular for all of human history. And we forget that sometimes, and we think that we're advanced and we do things better, when maybe we don't. And when it comes to sex, we can think about all the livestock that children have seen throughout all of the ages of human history, and still in a lot of places in the world today, where kids just literally see the piggies playing piggyback. And they see the mammal with the penis, puts it into the mammal with the vagina, and later the baby piggies are born. And nobody's sheltering their eyes going, oh, don't look, it's too terrible. But they're saying, yes, we're going to have more food, or we're going to have more money, or, we're going to have another horse, or we're going to have another puppy, or whatever it may be. And these are things that weren't hidden from kids, and they could figure it out. The little boy could figure out and go, wait a second. The boy does that. Okay, I see where babies come from. And the girl could go, wait. Okay, I understand what's going on here. The girl, okay, I get it. And they could put it together, and it wasn't secretive, it wasn't sensual, it wasn't shameful. It was just a part of life. Death was a part of life. Sex was a part of life. These were just things that happened. Last week, I was talking with my 8-year-old, and we had another conversation. My wife and I both had a conversation with him, and we explained to him that women have eggs in them and men have semen. And we explained a little bit more about where babies come from and how babies are made. This wasn't the first conversation we had ever had. This was just probably the most technical one that we had had. And it's really funny because he's really squeamish about anything regarding any bodily function. It doesn't matter what it is. And this one was particularly hilarious in his response to us. But it wasn't something that he had never heard of before. It was just a little more detailed than we had been in the past. A few weeks prior to that, I was putting his trampoline together that he had gotten for Christmas, and the instructions, he was working with me. The instructions said to take this male end, put it in the female end. And some people would have gone, oh my goodness, let me hide this from him, let me downplay it, let me turn his attention. And I didn't at all. I brought his attention to it, and I said, look, Bubba, it says the male goes in the female. It says just like the connection that a daddy and mommy make when they're making a baby. And I just moved on from there. I didn't make it really complicated. I didn't go philosophical on him. I just showed, like, male, female, they're different, and here's how they work together. And I moved on from there. So right now you're wondering, wait a second, I thought I'm never supposed to have the talk with my kids. And that is my point. I don't think you should ever have the big talk with your kids, because I think you should always be having regular talks with your kids. My 5-year-old, he doesn't understand everything about the water cycle and how it goes around in every single element, but he does get the fact that water evaporates, and it makes a cloud, and it rains back down. That's all he needs to know for now. Life gives us all kinds of opportunities to explain more to our kids as they age, with everything. Their learning should be progressive, their learning should be age-appropriate, and we do that naturally with almost every subject, except for death and sex. And sex, for some reason, we put all this pressure on ourselves to go, is now the right time? Is now the right time? Is now the right time? And we make it sound like we're going to have this gigantic lecture on it. And if we're setting ourselves up to do that, I think you are setting yourself up for a really awkward and really complicated and really confusing day. Because there is so much to be said about sex that I don't think you should attempt it all at once. You've got to cover the biological, the anatomical, you've got to cover the emotional, the spiritual, the possible sinful. There's so much to be said. I don't think there should be this one moment, hey, I need to tell you everything there is to know about sex, but just like everything else we teach our children, it's just called parenting. It comes as we go, and we should build on other foundation that we've already laid. So we can relieve ourselves of that pressure. And some of the parents who are saying, I'm going to wait till they're 37 years old, you can relax and remember that God invented this. The devil did not invent the penis. The devil did not invent the vagina. The devil did not invent orgasms. God invented orgasms, and he said they are very good. Everything he made, he said it was very good. So if you're thinking about keeping all sexual information away from your kids, I'm going to warn you, you're going to also have to keep them away from the Bible, because the Scripture gets very explicit, and there's a lot of texts that, prostitutes, concubines, God calls people whores. There's the Song of Solomon that is a lot of sexual explanation going on. Some people go, I think it's all just about Christ in the church. Well, all of Scripture points to Christ in the church, but all throughout ancient Jewish history, little Jewish boys weren't even allowed to read the Song of Solomon because all the adults understood what was being said and what the text was describing in a lot of those verses. And this was a verse, I was going to read it. I filmed this earlier, and Natalie said, babe, you can't read that. Too many people are going to be offended. Which is kind of crazy because it helps to prove my point that God is not a prude. He's not ashamed, but we often are. So I'll tell you where the Scripture is. This is like the most graphic text I could think of. Ezekiel 23, verse 20. I'm not going to read it to you. You got to look it up for yourself. Ezekiel 23, verse 20, if you're really curious. That's not the text that you're going to put on your refrigerator to memorize for the week, and you're not going to find it on a mug in Lifeway. Dang, that would be so funny. Lifeway should totally make that, and somebody should hang it in their house. But anyway, once you look up that Scripture, you'll be laughing with me, hopefully. But you don't have to have the big talk, remember, and this doesn't cheapen the subject in any way by having the little talks along the way and remembering that, you know what, God calls a spade, so we can do the same thing. It is special. It is still holy. It is for marriage, and it is God's gift to married people. It was His idea from the very beginning, and we've got to use His truth to help alleviate us from our fear of, I'm afraid that I'm going to awaken something in my children. And that's what I think a lot of us deal with. I'm afraid that I'm going to stir something up before it's time. I'm going to awaken love before it's time, like the Song of Solomon talks about. But here's the truth. You're not. And people think crazy stuff like, my kid's going to become a porn star, and I'm going to just mess them up entirely. You're not going to. That's totally irrational, and it goes against everything we know about good parenting when we communicate with our kids, especially when we point them into the ways of godliness. What we do know is our kids are going to find their private parts, just like you did and just like I did. And you and I want to be careful not to add a culture of shame or secrecy, that's the word. We don't want to add shame or secrecy or make everything seem sinful. We just want to have open communication about, here's the way God made you. He made you good. You are good. This is what His intention was. We don't want them to feel like they can never talk to us. If we make everything weird and shameful and sinful and secretive, they're going to say, I can never talk to Daddy about this stuff because he gets really mad and makes me feel bad about stuff. I'm never going to talk to Mommy about this stuff because she can't handle it and she makes it weird for me. So I will encourage you, and I'll put a link to this. This is a resource that Natalie and we just bought, and we actually used it to guide that conversation about the eggs and the semen with our 8-year-old. And you might not want to use everything in it. You might determine that, your child isn't ready. But this is for ages 5 through 8. It's called Before I Was Born, God's Design for Sex. This is book 2. And they have a whole series that leads up into the teen years to help prep kids. And I found it pushed me to communicate things before I would have naturally done it. Because again, I wanted to wait till they're 37 years old and then just say, hey, look at those dogs over there. Okay, that's how babies are made. But there's a lot of good involved with sex that we should be willing to communicate with our kids. So you may get the book and determine that you're not ready for certain things and you are for others. So I encourage you, get a hold of good resources, use them. But more than that, I recommend that you have regular conversations with your kids.